Welcome to Sip of Cinema, the only podcast in the world to actually murder the game and get away with it. I'm Alex.
I'm Andres.
And today is our very special Halloween spooky episode.
Ooh.
I know everybody's been talking about it. So we're actually going to do things a little bit different today. We're going to have a big, long Halloween special, if you haven't noticed by the timestamp. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have two parts, and we're going to have a little bit of a break in between. But before we get into that, I just want to talk about the lovely drink that we have.
Now, you're probably wondering, wow, that looks like a beautiful Bloody Mary. Who doesn't love a beautiful Bloody Mary?
I love a Bloody Mary. How about you, Andres?
I despise a Bloody Mary. I'm doing this for y'all. This is the spookiest drink we could think of without, batch making something in a cauldron with a smoke machine.
Yeah, and
we don't have that
bat's
kind
blood.
of budget.
No, we don't. I don't get what your issue with the Bloody Mary is. I think it's a perfectly fine drink. Normally, I have it at brunch as opposed to 8 p.m. when we're recording this, but
I don't know. Yeah, we are recording this at 8:30 p.m. I don't know, man. It weighs me down. It feels like a meal, but also I haven't eaten in like 8 hours. It's probably going to be some good, so who knows?
I think you need the nutrition. And speaking of the nutritional contents of this drink, I just want to talk a little bit about how it gets made. So everybody's had a Bloody Mary, or at least they've seen one. So it's not the most complicated thing in the world. But what we got going on today is actually I did a couple things different. So we put a little salt and pepper on the rim, try and spice it up a little bit. We got the lime wedge and the celery, and then we used some Deep Eddy's Pickle vodka to just really enhance the flavor and make sure that Andreas loved it even more.
Honestly, I just took a sip. I'm not mad.
You're not mad about it?
Yeah, I'm not overjoyed.
Look, I'm not using Zing Zang fucking,
That's fair.
mix over here.
That's
all right,
valid.
this is good quality mix that I got at HEB back in the day. It's not old. I just got it like a month ago. And I think it's pretty good. So you just slowly slip on that, and I think you're gonna be so enthralled with my stories today, you're not even gonna notice that you're sipping on it.
Call that a sip of cinema.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so to get into the first segment of today's podcast, what we're gonna be doing is let me explain the rules a little bit. So the theme here is horror movies that are based on true stories. So I wanted to have a little bit of fun because it's the holidays. I like to have fun for Halloween. And so we're going to play a little bit of a game. Now, I assigned Andreas some movies to watch based on this category. But I'm not going to tell you, the audience, what they are. I want you to be able to play along too. So, no cheats, no spoilers, no whammies. And so what I'm going to do is I looked up we watched the movies, obviously, and we also I looked at the stories that they were based on and tried to, generally get a grasp on what was actually happening. So I have written here probably the shittiest blurb that could possibly be made about the true story. It's like 2 to 3 sentences each.
And shitty on purpose, right?
And it's shitty on purpose because I want this to actually be a challenge for you. And I want you to try and guess which movie you think it is based on that synopsis. That synopsis is of the real life events. After that, I'll tell you what actually went down, and we'll talk a little bit about whether or not the movie lived up to the expectations of the real story.
Okay.
So, are you ready?
Probably not.
Let's cheers it.
Let's cheers to that.
Let's cheers to that. Hell yeah. Okay. So off to the races. Here we go. Here's the first one. All right.
I'm
cool.
nervous.
A religious family moved into a new home and honestly got a great price for it. However, they wound up leaving soon after, suffering financial problems. During and after their stay, they told scary stories about the house to help justify the move and absolve themselves of the burden.
And no, I guess.
Now you guess.
That's Amityville, right?
That is 100%
Yeah.
Amityville. We have a soundboard on this thing, right?
I've
Let's
never
not
tested
do that right
it.
now. Let's not, test that right now.
It said religious fam. Were they religious in the movie?
They were.
Yeah, and then for a great price, that was something they specifically talked about. So,
Yep. Absolutely.
connected those.
There you go. No, they were religious because they got a priest to come bless the house. They were in very close communication with that priest before some really weird stuff happened in the movie. They got a great price on it because it went for $80K.
Imagine.
Yeah. Never today. It actually last sold in 2017 for $600,000, which was $200,000 below asking for it. And the address has actually changed several times since the real life events happened there, because it just got fanatical, you know.
So how much did they indulge the story?
Sure. So here's what actually happened. In November 1974, and I'm sorry I have to read this out. I couldn't memorize this all yet. In November 1974, Ronald J. DeFeo Jr. murdered his parents, children, wife, and 4 siblings with a rifle. 13 months later, the Lutz family moved in and lasted 28 days in the haunted house. While there, stepfather George Lutz claimed to see his wife levitating while asleep in bed, as well as the children. The family also reports seeing green ooze coming from the walls and a red-eyed pig creature staring them down from a window multiple times. The priest that came out to bless the house, so that was a real thing, also heard a voice scream, "Get out," during the blessing. And he also told the family to never sleep in that room because he just got a bad vibe from it. So that portrayal in the movie was real, according to the story. And after they were out, after that 28-day period, the family later took a lie detector test about the phenomenon, and they actually wound up passing the test. So there's a little bit of that going on. But despite that, their lawyer later claimed that they made up the story over several bottles of wine to get out of their financial bind, because, I mean, it was a little bit of a stretch for them to be able to get this house in the movie. That was true in real life. It was they only got the house because it came at such a discount, and they knew about the murders and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. It's definitely somewhat it's a pretty honest portrayal, and actually one of the few kind of widely renowned situations involving like possession or like a poltergeist or you know, a haunted house, whatever you want to call it, that most people agree could have been real. Like, if you had to pick a situation where you think that stuff could have been real or where your mind could be changed, Amityville, the Amityville horror situation, that house is kind of like the standout, which I think is interesting. So based on everything I just told you, how do you think the movie did in terms of relaying the story?
I mean, I guess it relayed it pretty well. You know, priest came, blessed. Well, in the movie, the priest didn't actually bless the house.
No, he came to bless the house, but
Got
he didn't get
sicky icky.
Yeah, and then flies, so many flies.
Bro,
beware the flies.
An absurd amount of flies.
Yeah.
And they didn't even realize he was there. But yeah, I feel like it did it all right, I guess. I mean, I'm sure it elaborated to an extent, but I watched it a few weeks ago, so it's not fully rendered in my brain. The only thing that stuck with me hardcore was the cut of straight up domestic violence occurring, and then it cuts to a nun sinking a jump shot on some kids.
That was crazy.
How are you gonna do that? How are you gonna do that?
Nuns playing basketball, bro. No, I agree. I thought that was wild. It's also just I don't know, to a certain extent with all of these movies, I think the age of the film doesn't necessarily detract from the film by any means, but it does detract, in my opinion, from like the scariness, just because of what can be portrayed on screen nowadays. But I liked Amityville Horror. I get why it's a cult classic, and I get why like the story was so inspiring for making it a cult classic in the first place. But yeah, there was no like red tunnel to hell in their basement or anything like that.
I would imagine,
yeah. And but apparently the son of the family, who is, I believe, the youngest of the siblings, is like a stonemason in New York. I'm not gonna like call out any names. You can find the information if you want, but that's not my business. He still gets nightmares to this day that like wake him up in the middle of the night from his experience there. So yeah, there you go. That was Amityville Horror. Correct guess. Congratulations, and a gold star for you, Andres.
Oh my god, thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. On to the next one. Are you ready?
I Yes.
I'm not going to say that for everyone. Don't worry. Okay. A couple that's really into ghosts decides to help out a family that was experiencing weird phenomena in their home. The family said it was ghosts, and the aforementioned couple hosted a seance to communicate with those ghosts. After this failed, the couple tried to do the same at other homes before they were outed as frauds.
That has to be The Conjuring, right?
It's totally The Conjuring. There we go. Mm-hmm. So this one, some of these stories get a little bit longer, and forgive me, but I just found it too interesting to like leave out some of these details. So
they're here for the information, Alex.
Exactly. So here's the real story behind The Conjuring. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. They quickly gained notoriety as respected paranormal investigators after their initial investigation of the Amityville hauntings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Though Ed died in 2006, Lorraine was a consultant on the film and claims that she didn't let the directors take any more dramatic license than was necessary.
Wait,
in the film, in The Conjuring.
Oh, I thought you meant the Amityville, like one of the remakes of Amityville Horror or something. Oh, okay, that's cool.
This was for The Conjuring. She was there, like working with them, like telling her side of the story, and like, yeah, apparently there were a couple of things that they changed. Like, for instance, I don't know if you noticed, but like I mentioned a seance. Mm-hmm. So Ed and Lorraine didn't actually perform. Well, here, I'll get to it, but yeah. Yeah, so here we go. In January 1971, the Perrin family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice strange things happening almost immediately after they moved in. Carolyn allegedly researched the history of the home and discovered that it had been in the same family for 8 generations, and that many of them had died under mysterious or horrible circumstances. Several of the children had drowned in a nearby creek, one was murdered, and a few of them hung themselves in the attic. Yeah, trust me, it only goes downhill from here. The spirit that was depicted in the film, Bathsheba, I think is how it was pronounced, was the worst of several noticed spirits. It turns out there was an actual real person named Bathsheba Sherman who lived on the Perrin's family property in the mid-1800s. She was rumored to have been a Satanist, and there was no evidence that she had been involved in the death of a nearby neighbor's child, though no trial ever took place. Sorry, there was evidence. Jesus Christ, I can't read. Bloody Marys, y'all.
Words are hard. It's okay.
Yeah. She was buried in a nearby Baptist cemetery in downtown Harrisville. The Warrens were later kicked out after Carolyn, the matriarch of the family, became possessed and started floating at a seance, not an exorcism, due to the fear of her own mental stability. The Warrens went on to be mocked nationwide after being called frauds by a notable neurologist and a podcaster.
Oh, those podcasters will get you, bro. Don't stand a chance.
So they gained a decent bit of notoriety for a while, but certainly not the levels of success that were depicted in the film. Mm-hmm. And so, with that being said, how do you feel about that? Isn't that concerning?
That is concerning. That's very concerning.
That's very concerning.
Just to get my timeline correct. So Homeboy died in 2006?
Yes, sir.
So when did all their hubbubaloo go down?
That was way back in...
I'm sorry if you said it. It went over
No,
my
it's
head.
okay. 1971.
Okay, word.
Mm-hmm. So this was all going down during the 70s, which you can see like in the film based off of mostly just like the cars and their outfits.
Yeah, there's a bit of ambiguity with it, but yeah, I mean, I feel like Amity was more accurate than this, but there's still a level of accuracy in this. I mean, minus it all being fake.
Yeah.
Well, so, also that was in the first one too.
Yeah. I mean, and that's always going to be the case. Like Ed and Lorraine didn't actually, so they wouldn't do an exorcism because they weren't Catholic priests, and so they were apparently pretty strict about that in real life, which I do give them credit for. I don't know what to make of like their story, but definitely in the movies they allowed themselves, or I guess just Lorraine did, because R.I.P. Ed.
Yeah,
they allowed themselves to be portrayed as like more successful because, well, obviously in the movies like all that shit is real. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to make of like these Amityville and Conjuring kind of like haunted horror stories. I don't know, like, Andreas, what's your opinion on the occult and the mysterious?
I was gonna ask you. I mean, it's my favorite like subgenre of horror.
Yeah.
That kind of dealio.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be very, no such thing as ghosts,
Mm-hmm.
but A, it's fun to believe in ghosts.
Yeah,
so I
fair.
choose to believe in ghosts. Also, B, I know a lot of people who are very spiritually in touch with themselves and the universe, So even if there isn't like spirits or anything like that or an afterlife, I do very much believe that things in the universe are connected.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm sure that extends past death.
Mm-hmm.
So whether there's ghosts or not, who am I to say? I'm not qualified.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I do think that things stay connected forever.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not a huge believer in like the whole concept of like there are things in this world, there are things that have happened that you just can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like they're just things that have happened that we can't explain yet,
Mm-hmm.
or that nobody has enough like good recorded information on to really be able to tell. And that's why, I mean, when I was younger, dude, I could not watch horror movies at all. I couldn't watch. I mean, I stayed up all night after watching I Am Legend because
bro.
And fair enough, right? But it got to me, and it was only when I was older that I was able to really kind of ration my way out of it. Now I can really enjoy horror movies for what they are, which is just kind of like a fun way to explore the twisted side of your imagination.
Yeah, I was 100% the same way. I was a little cheeky little baby boy when I was younger. But now I very much enjoy them. I do find that I don't get a lot of rewatchability from them.
That's fair.
But I do have like my all-time favorites that I do watch a lot. But yeah.
I will say I love The Conjuring, and that's definitely one that has rewatch value for me. Just because I don't know, man, something about it, like it's really well done, and there's nothing about The Conjuring, in my opinion, that is like camp or like tacky or like they go overboard for the sake of like shock value or anything like that. It's just a really, really well told story, and I'm a huge fan of the Conjuring series.
Yeah, I've only ever seen the first one.
Okay.
And the first time I watched it was for this. But I was a fan of a lot of the production design, but besides that, I don't think anything really stuck with me.
Okay, that's fair.
So, like, the general story I enjoyed because, like I said, that's my favorite subgenre of horror.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna have an itch to watch it again anytime soon.
That's fair. It's not your cup of tea. It's not your Bloody Mary.
It really ain't my Bloody Mary.
That's fair. That's fair, dude.
All right, let's
get on to the next one. All right. This is gonna sound like nonsense.
Okay.
Go with it. A man convinced others to kill on his behalf. Also, 4 people were stabbed and never caught, and no one knows their motive. Also, a boy was home when people tried to rob homes in his neighborhood, where they knocked to see if anyone was home.
Is that Strangers?
It's definitely Strangers.
I got a lot to say about this movie, bro. I got a lot to say about this.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, let me tell you the inspiration, or the true story this was based on. So, this was not unlike some of the others, and you're gonna find the Strangers listed on like every list. I mean, that's how we wound up here, where it's like listed as based on a true story. It is based on just like a couple of things that happened in different places. So, for example, here we go. Primarily inspired by the murders committed by the Manson family in 1969, later nicknamed Helter Skelter, which were organized by Charles Manson in an ill-conceived bid to start a race war the cult leader had predicted. The second inspiration for the Strangers' true story is the infamous 1981 Ketty Cabin murders. 4 people were killed in a small California resort town, including Sue Sharp and some other people. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to do names. My bad. Disturbingly, the motive for these murders is still unknown, as the Ketty Police Department never caught the real killers, and the case remains unsolved. The third and final slice of real inspiration for the Stranger story derives from director Brian Bertino's life experience. As a child, Bertino recalls a night his parents weren't home and someone knocked on the door asking for someone who didn't live there. In reverse of the Strangers, Bertino states he later learned that the people knocking were robbing houses in the neighborhood when no one was home, instead of attacking people in their houses. So this was pieced together.
Yeah.
From multiple different things, and it's about as based on a true story as any movie where people die is. And there's not like ghosts and stuff. It's so I mean I get it. Like there's the aspect from the Ketty cabin where there's seemingly no motive. At the end of The Strangers, they just kind of drive away in a truck, and they just like get going, and they're like, tough one. First one's always the toughest or something like that. And like the Manson murders where they just kind of walk in, and I think there's one in particular, and I didn't actually write down the name of it, of a lady who was I think like an actress at the time who just got stabbed like crazy. But like that's it. And I'll shut up now because I want to hear your opinions. You have strong thoughts on The Strangers, so
I have a lot to say about The Strangers.
Tell me what you got to say. I want to know.
Do you want me to first talk about the accuracy of it, or do you want me to just talk about my thoughts about the movie?
Well, I guess I would both, honestly. Wrap it all up.
Well, yeah, accuracy, like you said, is stitched together, and they took some liberties in it and everything like that.
Yeah.
Weren't actually murdering people. They were just breaking in, yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, like, what? It's enough to piece together a movie. Is it actually? No.
Yeah, I was going to say, I counter.
I not despise, but strongly disliked this.
Yeah.
I watched it. It's fresh in my brain. I watched it last night. Are parts of it spooky? Sure. But by a third of the way through the film, all fear had left my body because I was just the pure stupidity.
Yeah.
First and foremost. Actually, before first and foremost.
Okay.
Prologue to the first and foremost. The first sequence of the film plays, like they're getting to the house, everything like that. And I literally turned to Mariah and I was like, I don't like how they're doing anything already.
Yeah.
I didn't like how things were cut. I didn't like how things were shot. I didn't like how anything looked, the, color correction, anything like that.
Yep.
It felt so bland and boring,
dude,
and gross.
So bland.
And like, dude, what was I looking at?
I don't know.
Secondly, who in the hell does not have a peephole on their front door?
Dude,
are you kidding me? Are you kidding me,
bro? I thought that the entire time.
And how are you so willy-nilly with your fucking front door locked, bro? Especially after the heebie-jeebies start,
Yeah.
Homeboy leaves to get Liv Tyler's cigarettes, leaves the front door unlocked.
Yep.
Granted, the dude was like already in the house or whatever, right?
Yeah, whatever.
But if he wasn't, he would have been anyways.
Yeah.
And it's just, dude, also, how are you just gonna waste my boy Dennis like that?
Dude, I thought that the entire time. I was like, that was low-key it was the most upsetting, but also the funniest part of the entire movie when his head just gets blown off like that. I was more compelled by his character than I was by the main characters or the murderers, quite frankly.
Dude, because he had personality.
Yeah.
I love Liv Tyler. I really do. But I thought both protagonists were so stale.
Yep.
Her character was so annoying. I didn't think the way she reacted to a lot of things was accurate to how someone actually would have reacted.
Yeah.
And once again, they're just all so dumb.
Yeah.
They're so dumb. And I know that's like the typical, people in horror movies are so dumb. No, they're fucking dumb, bro.
Yeah, they're really, really dumb. Like, stay by your phone.
Yeah.
Like if she just stayed in one spot, like none of the other things would have happened. Her phone would have charged. It wouldn't have gotten thrown into a fire, and she could have called. And like these weren't smart killers. I don't know what kind of movie magic shit they did to actually even get into that house in the first place. But also part of me was taken aback because I just was thinking, which you shouldn't do this during a movie. Like if you're directing a movie and your audience is doing this, you've done a bad job. I was thinking about the POV of the killers just sitting in a closet for an hour.
Yeah.
Moving and moving around to different rooms and moving a thing and that's what they weren't even being actually terrifying.
Yeah. The whole time I was trying to figure out what are their rules. Every horror film antagonist or monster or ghost or whatever has rules essentially. Yeah. Whether they're laid out in front of you or not. When they make the movie, they make rules for the antagonist. At least that's how I view it.
It's supposed to be. Right.
What were their rules, bro? why did they decide not to kill when they decided not to kill? Why did they decide to do things? It didn't make any sense, dude. And when they actually got to the part where they killed them, spoiler, they die.
That was also boring.
That was so boring.
That was so like the slowest stabs I've ever seen in my entire life, taking turns, just being real slow about it. The main characters are just going like, ugh.
I felt no tension.
That's
bro.
it. No, nothing. There was no relief. And then her like opening her eyes or popping up at the very end. I was like, fuck, dude, that just felt laborsome.
Dude. Also, why is she wearing a mask? They already saw her face when they opened the front door.
Yeah.
What's the point, dude? They already.
And they're gonna die.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, I hated that movie.
Yeah.
Onwards and upwards.
super dull. Anyways, there you go. So, on to the next one. All right. So, are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Okay. A man with a bad childhood spent a lot of time in jail before he went on a killing spree. He then killed a lot of people in a town in Florida, mostly young women. At this time, the media coverage was going crazy.
That's very obviously Scream.
It is super Scream. Yeah, not bad. I didn't know if that was going to be... no, I guess I gave it away. But
yeah, the media
okay.
coverage
yeah,
gave
the
it
media.
away.
I had to... when I was doing these, when I was putting together these like bad synopses, I was like, I have to give something. Otherwise, it's just like literally like there's no connection. So you're passing with flying colors, kid.
Thank you.
So here's the real story there. Over the course of 4 days, serial killer Danny Rolling. By the way, I have I don't care about outing the serial killer. So serial killer Danny Rolling terrorized the college students of Gainesville, Florida, in a murderous rampage where he murdered 5 University of Florida students in a spree that terrified the nation. Ooh. Danny Rolling was abused as a child and broke in May of 1990. He shot his 58-year-old father twice and nearly killed him. And then on August 24th of 1990, Danny broke into the home of 2 incoming freshmen at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Rolling followed them home, broke into their house, and simply overpowered them. He then proceeded to torture, rape, and kill an additional 6 people within a 2-mile radius before actually being arrested for robbery of a Winn-Dixie. Yeah, he got caught for that, dumb piece of shit. 4 months later, DNA evidence broke and pointed the finger at Danny as the Gainesville Ripper, at which point he confessed and was later executed for these crimes. The killings, campus, and media frenzy that ensued throughout this time were the main inspiration for Scream. Yeah. So this is all going down on a college campus, the big media frenzy. So like that was, all of that was like the inspiration behind Scream. As far as I was able to find, there was not actually like a mask and a black like cloak or whatever. But
no, what's your scary movie?
Yeah, exactly. But with that being said, a lot of the other stuff seemed to me to be fairly true. Although, I mean, okay, so I will say, I left out the details of how this guy did what he did because we're not really that kind of podcast. Yeah,
it's probably for the best.
Yeah, probably for the best. But if you look it up, like, trigger warning for sure. And let me just say, like, Scream did not do all that,
which I think was in good taste.
I think that was
smart by them.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Scream just in general? Because it's such a like classic, but also it's so, you know what I mean?
I think Scream is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy Scream. I could rewatch Scream. Now, any of the sequels, I never want to touch again.
Throw them out. Who needs them?
Dude. Like the one that came out this year, I lost all memory of it the day after I saw it in theaters.
I literally didn't even go see it. I just wasn't interested, quite frankly.
Yeah, you're not missing out, bro. You're really not missing out. And I felt the same way about the one that came out the year before, or was it 2 years? It was 1 or 2. It was 1 year ago, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Year and a half. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I felt the exact same way. It just was not gripping to me. But the first one is pretty campy. It's pretty fun. You know, the whole horror comedy kind of I don't know if horror comedy is the right term.
It's not quite comedy, and I do hesitate to lean too hard on that just because of maybe the connotation that we have from Scary Movie.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just, you know, originally Scream was supposed to be called Scary Movie.
No, I didn't.
That's why Scary Movie is called Scary Movie.
That's so funny, dude. Yeah. They launched a fucking empire with that.
But horror comedy was not the right term. just meta horror, like self-aware horror.
It was very self-aware,
which now they've taken way too far with the sequels. But I enjoy it a lot. It's in it's like one of my preferred horror films, I'll say, but just the first one.
That's super fair. And I agree. I think that the way it was portrayed is clearly inspired by the real story, but it's not trying to recreate it, right? And I do think that was best. And I think it made it way more iconic to begin with, because there are so many movies out there that just do terrible things to people, and like that's the horror, but they made like an icon with the first Scream. And I think it was better that it wasn't just like some white guy who like got beat on by his dad when he was young, like it was the mask and stuff like that. And obviously there's like the reveal and whatnot, but at the same time, the anonymity made it so much more fun. And like the way that they were targeting people made you do like kind of a whodunit kind of situation throughout the course of the movie that I think made it more engaging in the, as well.
Yeah, it's all time.
It's all a good time. It's all a good time. So this next one, here we go. A little blurb, if you will. A young boy got a Ouija board as a birthday present, and things get worse from there. After his aunt died, he started to experience some really weird and creepy things. 2 priests tried to help him, and it took a while, but I guess it works. Yay.
Sick. Good for him. That's The Exorcist, right?
That is 100% The Exorcist. Okay, word. Pretty interesting, right? It was a little boy, not a little girl, but I think they did the right thing casting who they did, because Reagan, the character Reagan, like fucking phenomenal. I mean, how do you get a child to act like that? So it's crazy. So here's the real story here. In March 1949, a newspaper reported that a 14-year-old boy known as Robbie, or Roland Doe, these were not his real names, this was like reporting names, was possessed by something sinister, and that the exorcist priest performed an exorcism on him. The boy, raised in a German Lutheran family, was no stranger to the paranormal things in life. After asking for a Ouija board for his birthday, his Aunt Harriet gifted him one. Bad idea. After she passed away, the boy began to experience creepy and abnormal things around the house. Rattlings on the walls, strange noises, and flying objects. The exorcism had to be stopped early because Roland ripped off a piece of a mattress and he ripped off a piece of a mattress spring and threw it at the priest.
Hey, yo.
Pretty crazy. A few days later, Roland started getting red scratches with the marks spelling out the word Lewis, like Louis. This alerted the family to go to the St. Louis University, where he was introduced to Father Walter H. Halloran and Reverend William Bowdern. I could talk about them also because they're cool guys, They did this shit. Who performed an exorcism on Roland. When Bowdern left a crucifix under Doe's pillow, the family saw the furniture flip over and Roland's mattress shaking uncontrollably, and the crucifix pushed to the end of the bed. Roland Doe received several exorcisms at the home, Georgetown University Hospital, and the Alexian Brothers Hospital. With each exorcism, Roland Doe allegedly spoke in Latin, urinated, vomited, spit, and spoke in deep and unfamiliar voice. Doe's last exorcism was performed with the help of the priests, and Halloran got his nose broken at some point during that ritual. Nevertheless, the priests claim that this final attempt was successful.
Wow.
Yeah. So like I was kind of mentioning with Amityville, like this is another one of those situations where people are like, that might have been real, but I do think it's interesting, just generally some of the differences. Like this is not the house doing it to them. This is a Ouija board, R.I.P. Aunt Harriet. And I mean, I almost don't even want to talk about the real story because The Exorcist is so good. I kind of want.
It's so good, bro. It's my favorite horror movie ever.
It's so good. It's so good. So I will say this was my first time watching The Exorcist for this. I don't know why I had never seen it before. I guess it just like hadn't come up or whatever. My stupid reason could be. But shit, it was good. It was so good. And I like what I told my fiance about it was that it was I think one of the reasons I found it so compelling is because it was a good movie before any of the horror got introduced. It was not some like bullshit introduction for the sake of like getting to the scary part and like let's get to that. It was like a compelling drama leading up to that, and it just like morphed into this movie that if you didn't know the title of the movie or its reputation, you would go into that movie not knowing what it was going to turn into at all. As opposed to like so many horror movies kind of have that.
Ooh, from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Or like we don't give a fuck. We're kids. We're going out to the woods for spring break, you know? Like it doesn't follow that kind of like go-to kind of gimmicky format at all. It's just so well executed.
Bro, just like it's like 20 minutes before they even get to the US, bro. That whole section, sick as shit. I'd watch a whole movie of just that.
Yeah.
You know, and then they actually get to the US. I'd watch a whole movie just of the priest talking about his life, you know? Yeah. And then you get to the actual spooky part, and like, that's bonkers. Give me more of that too. And it's just, and you have the most, I consider the most iconic horror scene ever in the actual exorcism at the end. Yeah. Bonkers. Fun fact. I might be lying, but I think this is true. I saw it on Twitter. Who knows?
Okay, yeah, sure.
You know the excerpt where it's just like the face real fast? Like, yeah. That originally was not going to be in the movie. That was a makeup test that they tossed. Oh. And then the editor just spliced it in without telling the director, R.I.P. my boy Will. And he was like, oh, that's spooky. Let's do that. And then made it into the movie.
That's crazy.
And it's so iconic, bro.
It's super iconic. Yeah. And every character is so compelling. Every character is so compelling. Also, just the pure shock value, but not shock value like you typically see in horror. This is like actually kind of gut-wrenching, seeing this like young girl. I won't describe it, but
yeah,
you know.
Yeah. It's pretty obscene. A lot of things that no one would ever want to imagine a little girl doing. It's pretty gross.
Yeah. But I think that they did it well, because you could do that for just pure shock value, and like that would be kind of like gross and unnecessary. But something about the way it was done in this movie, and let me know if you have opinions on like why this is, just feels it makes it more compelling, because the demon is so evil and just vulgar and just like doesn't give a fuck and just wants to like cause chaos and is like, you know, like you tell how chaotic this demon is, and it's just like it wants to just start shit and be evil. And like that is it. There is no motivation beyond that. And so like I found that even more compelling in this movie. Not that like I enjoyed watching it, but it felt right for the story.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of times in film, you can disagree with me if you want, I think you earn the right to have shock value.
Yeah.
Like David Lynch is really good about this, I think, where he earns the right to have shocking stuff in his movies. But that movie being so well made, being so enthralling, you just dive so deep into it, it earns the right to just all of a sudden throw the most vulgar, shocking thing at you ever. Yeah. You know, like,
because repeatedly. It really does smack you in the face. It's not like this movie is boring and then we're doing shock value because it's the only thing this movie has. If anything, the shock value is like one of the definitely memorable, but it's not even remotely everything that movie has to offer.
No, yeah. And it builds up to the shock. Like, yes, shock comes out of nowhere a lot of times, but it still builds up to it.
Yeah.
You start with this daughter who's the sweetest little creation, the sweetest little soul, you know, and then she kind of builds up to it. You know, the scene where like she slaps her. Or like when she like does start getting like medical treatment and attention and stuff, it starts to build up and then just boils up and just.
I'd even mention the body horror of the hospital.
Dude, yes.
Holy shit. Like that is so good, because oh my God, I'd be mortified by that. Like that they introduced horror from so many different angles and just compiled it into this masterpiece, because it does all feel very logical. And you're right, they do build up to that shock value, but it's, you know that something is coming, but you just could have never guessed what it was going to be.
Yep, absolutely. I think this is as close to we'll probably ever get to a perfect horror film.
Yep.
I love it. I'd watch it a million times over. I didn't watch it for this podcast episode because I've already seen it so many times and I had other things to watch, but I'm still gonna watch it before the end of October.
Yeah, hell yeah. I love it. Spooky season. Let's go. All right, next one. A guy with a bad dad and religious mom who told him girls are gross turned into a meanie during the 40s. After his whole family died, he did some messed up stuff and got arrested. Police noted he had furniture made of weird leather.
Oh, that's definitely Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It's 100% Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, weird leather. What are you talking about, bro?
Well, it's pretty weird leather. I don't know what you want me to say. So here's the real story. Born on the 27th of August, 1906 in Wisconsin, interestingly enough, Edward Theodore Gain was the son of an alcoholic and an ultra-religious woman who forced her son to read the Old Testament and instilled in him the idea that women are prostitutes sent to earth to tempt men. What that means about her...
Yeah, what? A little self-reflection,
I don't know, please. Yeah. The 1940s would see the beginning of Gain's reign of horror. After his father died, Gain developed a strange relationship with his mother, and in 1944, his brother Henry died, supposedly in a fire. His body was, however, found with signs of trauma. A year later, Ed's mother also died, and he was left alone in the house. In 1957, police raided Ed Gain's estate and found Bernice Warden, owner of the Plainfield hardware store, hanging by her ankles, decapitated, and with her guts removed. But that wasn't all the officers found, as they discovered several bodies throughout the house and everyday objects such as lamps and armchairs covered in human skin. According to his testimony, the only people he had killed were Bernice and Mary Hogan, while the rest of the lurid remains came from his penchant for grave desecration. He was committed to a mental institution until he died of respiratory failure in 1984, which so one thing about both Scream and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think it is so interesting to like still be alive for the horror movie that is inspired by you.
Yeah, what the hell?
So yeah, pretty gnarly in general.
Oh yeah, gnarly's a good word for it. But I see obviously they took liberties in the adaptation. Because the family it was a dude, a brother. Was there a mom in it?
Yeah, his mom was definitely still there.
Yeah. I haven't watched it in about 2 years, so
yeah,
bear with me.
Yeah, no, his mom was there, and you see like little flashes of like some history, but they definitely took liberties. But I mean, the whole Leatherface thing, pretty spot on for a horror.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's your take on Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
I mean, I think that it's one of the like quintessential slashers, you know, like up there with Nightmare on Elm Street, or like a Friday the 13th, you know. It's just like it's in that rotation, and I think that I like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I will say I am one of those people that like I also like Hellraiser and some of those other movies because I like to see how creative filmmakers can get with their gore. And this is definitely like gore. It's definitely in the original. It's a little bit more implied than it is in like some of the remakes where it's like really there in front of you. But I think it's good. I like it. I get why it's a part of that quintessential kind of mix. What about you? What do you think?
So I think as far as slasher films go, I think this is actually completely in a league of its own.
Oh, really?
That no slasher comes anywhere close to.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the original indie success stories.
I did not know it was indie.
Bro, it was complete, like full-blown indie, completely shot in Texas, like Texas crew, Texas cast, all like, so it's like the Texas indie film.
Yeah.
Bunch of nobodies, non-existent budget. But I don't remember what they were shooting on exactly, but it was like, dude, like guerrilla filmmaking.
Okay.
And it was just such a huge success.
Yeah.
It is like when you look at indie success stories, it's like this and like nothing else touches it.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can say stuff like that for like Blair Witch Project and stuff like that. But that's like a whole different can of worms. But I think I will say on like other slasher films, I'm not big on them. Friday the 13th, bro, I think is dog water. That's just me though. I'm sorry.
No, it didn't hold up to age.
Yeah,
it didn't
dude.
hold up to age.
I don't know, too much Kevin Bacon. I don't know.
Yeah, fair.
But I do like Nightmare on Elm Street for what it is. I think it's fun. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like legitimately my second favorite horror film of all time.
Really, right behind Exorcist?
Dude, yes.
Really, that's awesome.
I love this
okay,
movie.
There we go.
I just think it's just so, because it's just like, you know, some people grade just general filmmaking and like horror filmmaking on two different scales or whatever. And I feel like, which I, you know, to each their own. I do that as well, but like when it comes down to it, I feel like Exorcist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre are like the two horror films where I just, on a general filmmaking like grading system, they both kill it.
Yeah, that's fair.
The directorial choices, like the way it's shot, dude, it's my jam.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So if you were like trying to get people on board with horror movies, those would be like the two that you would like throw their way.
Oh, dude, 100%. Well, yeah. I mean, like when you're getting someone into horror films, I feel like you have to give them like a sample, like a sample size of a few different things.
Sure.
So you have to give them paranormal, you have to give them slasher, you have to give them an invasion film.
Yeah.
Extraterrestrial stuff.
Yeah.
Zombie, whatever. But those I think are like two of the cream. Like I put like those on the same pedestal as like Night of the Living Dead, or like Evil Dead 2 is like horror comedy, but like I'll put Evil Dead 2 in my top 3.
Yeah.
I just think they're like essentials.
Yeah, super fair. Super fair. And with that, we're going to move on to our last one.
Woo!
Woo! All right, so here we go. A man that lived a long time ago in Scotland started a weird group for people who were violent and had a weird food preference. They lived in isolation from big city folk and beat up people who were just trying to pass through the area. How rude.
How rude, bro. Is that the whole synopsis?
That is the whole business.
By process of elimination, based off what you assigned to me, this is The Hills Have Eyes.
This is The Hills Have Eyes.
And what a fever dream of a movie.
Jesus Christ. So I watched the newer one accidentally because I didn't realize that there was an older one, quite frankly. I just, it didn't come up. So you watched the older one.
Yeah, right? Dude. Did yours have a dashing young twink doing gymnastics as well?
Can't say it did.
Well, mine did, and it was the best part of the movie.
I feel like I missed out. I feel like I missed out. Okay, so here's the story, and this is literally like I saved this one for last on purpose because it's got the craziest like background story. It's insane. So when Wes Craven was researching at the New York Public Library, he happened across 16th century Scottish folklore and was hooked, particularly on the story of Sawney Bean. The story recalls a young man named Alexander Sawney Bean, no relation to me, who grew up to have a distaste for his father's honest trade of ditch digging and hedge trimming. Sawney left home with Black Angus Douglas, a local accused
What are these
witch. It's Scottish, bro. 16th century Scottish. A local accused witch who shared some dark inclinations with Sawney, namely cannibalism. The couple fled society for the more brutal lifestyle of wilderness, living near the Galloway coast. Throughout the 25 years that the family lived in the area, their clan grew to almost 50 members, including 14 children of their own, and some estimates say 32 grandchildren. Due to the isolation from society, the family grew from within. Incest, most likely giving rise to some genetic irregularities, a point which Wes Craven would exaggerate in his film to a grotesque effect. The family remained in the cave, hidden for years, preying upon poor and unlucky travelers in the area at night, robbing and cannibalizing their victims to stay fed. They were said to have dismembered and pickled. I said that right. Yeah, your face is so right, dude. This is the gnarliest. Dismembered and pickled the body parts for consumption. Although historians disagree, it is said that there could have been over 1,000 victims of the Bean family in the time that they were active.
Ain't no way.
Well, dude, I mean, 25 years, 50 people, like, you gotta eat. So, depends on how hungry they are.
Get your nutrients.
After eventually being caught, the family was placed in old Tollbooth prison, where onlookers and curious masses gathered to get a look at the savage family that was responsible for so much death. And then Here comes the end of old Sonny Bean. The family was given no due process, and the men had their genitals removed and tossed in fire, as well as their hands and feet severed, causing them to bleed to death. As for the women and children, they were made to watch the fates of the men in the Bean family, and then burned alive or hanged.
God damn!
That's what I'm saying, bro. That's crazy. So no nuclear. There's no family in the American desert for all of our American listeners. Like, you don't have to worry about that. You do have to worry about those Scots, though. Apparently.
Yeah, I guess so, bro.
Jesus Christ. So, what's your take on the creative liberty?
Bro, there's a lot of it, dude. The only similarity is family in the middle of nowhere eats people.
Yeah,
that's it.
That is pretty much it. So, like, the whole inspired by a true story. Also, it should be noted that the report of the Sonny Bean family came from the 18th century, so 2 centuries after it happened, and that's like the earliest report that we can find. So the idea that any of this is actually that real is, like, even that is pretty much a stretch. Fascinating story, though, and, like, I'm kind of here for it. In terms of how it portrayed on film, I watched the newer one, which was like, I guess, like 2005-ish.
I really wish we didn't know that we accidentally watched different ones until we started.
Yeah, I know. That would have been so fun. I expected a little bit more, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, there were, misshapen individuals who were, disfigured by nuclear holocaust, and like they were cannibals, and they feasted upon local passerbys. Mm-hmm. All that regular stuff. But I don't know. I still found it a little bit dull. Like I expected more eyes in the hills, to be honest. Like, it was really just any. It was really at least in the newer one, there were more people back at like the home camp of it or whatever, but there were like 5 main figures.
Yeah.
And that didn't really feel like what the title portrays, or even what this original story kind of makes it feel like.
Wait, there were more than 5 total?
What,
in yours?
In the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was not many more, but
they had straight up just like, they had like 6 or something. I think it was 3 brothers, 1 sister, and the parents.
Oh no, I'm talking about the attackers.
Yeah, so am I.
Okay, yeah.
And that was it.
Oh, interesting.
They didn't have any other people.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. See, and I expected more. Like, if like in the original kind of like thingy or whatever, there's supposed to be like 50 of them, and I expect to feel like these people are about to be overwhelmed by like this entire gang of people. And mm-hmm. Also, wait, did they have like an underground kind of mine that people got carted down to in yours?
No.
Really?
They had just like their cave that they lived in, but you barely see it.
Yeah, you barely see the cave in ours, and those two. And like, I kind of want to see like the underbelly of this like mini fucked up civilization of cannibals, like, I don't know, like in some movies, like for example Rosemary's Baby, mm-hmm. I respect and even appreciate the whole leave it to your imagination thing.
Yeah.
But when you've already shown us so much of what these people do and how their society like lives and how they attack people, like, just give it all to me, yeah, like, man. Don't leave me hanging. Don't leave me waiting here. What about yours?
Well, mine, did yours have like the grandpa that lived off in the distance?
He wasn't a grandpa. He was a gas station owner.
Yeah, the gas station owner was a grandpa.
Yeah, okay.
In mine.
Oh, he wasn't a grandpa in ours. He was a stranger.
Yeah, so he was like related, but like not really.
Interesting.
Did he also die a very sudden death in yours?
Yeah.
Have you seen Barbarian? Movie from last year?
I have. Remind
me exactly of how the homeless guy dies in Barbarian. Yeah. Like, exactly, the spitting image of it.
Yeah, that's fair.
But he was my favorite character in the movie.
Fair enough.
I thought the family, like the survivors, I thought most of them sucked.
Yeah, most of them did suck in mine too.
Do we think that was on purpose?
I mean, here's the thing. You need somebody to root for in your movie, and I felt like in the newer one there was like a younger brother character.
Yeah, that's the twink in mine.
Oh, okay. So he was really the main one that you even could root for, but he didn't actually do all that much himself. Mm-hmm. It was like the shittier husband of the older sister that did most of the killings of the same years. And I didn't care about him, so it didn't feel like a moment of triumph when he like got his baby. And
oh, he got his baby?
Did you?
No, they get the baby. They get the baby in this one.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess I wanted more of like, either I wanted more of the underbelly, or I wanted more of like a hero / redemption arc. And so the whole thing felt like you said, more of a fever dream than like a real story.
Yeah, man. I don't know. By the time it was over, I didn't feel like I had watched a movie. I felt like I had a fever dream, for lack of a better term, bro.
Fair enough.
But it was interesting. It was a trip. It was an adventure.
It was a trip. So was mine. And I guess with that being said, that takes us to the end of part 1, and allow us to clink as we head into intermission. Ooh. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I hope you stocked up at the concession stand. I hope you
got a little TT break in there.
Yep, do what you got to do.
I apologize, but I could not do any more Bloody Mary.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we had to trade out for a little bit of red wine.
Looks like blood.
Because we didn't have red rum. It was the closest thing we could find.
That would have been next year.
Next year, we got you. Regardless, we're gonna go ahead and change gears a little bit. And actually, I'm gonna let you, Andreas. I'm gonna let you kind of kick us off here.
All right. So, covered, more iconic films based on true events. Now, this is gonna be an iconic era of horror films. Which shout out to the Criterion channel for giving us this idea.
Yeah, this collection was phenomenal.
But we want to kind of dive into pre-code horror films. So those are horror films that came out between the years 1929 and 1934 before they really hit them hard with the censorship in the mid-30s.
Yeah, so Dre, why don't you tell us a little bit more for the fans at home? What does pre-code mean?
Pre-code, so censorship code, and what was it called again?
The Hays Code.
Hays Code, yes. So this time period, you saw a lot more, for then, raunchier things that wouldn't be allowed in the following years. A lot more taboo things. And these horror films weren't necessarily your typical like spooky monsters, killers, that kind of deal. It has that.
Yeah, sure.
But it's also kind of more suspenseful or like thriller-esque. But then you have films like, just to go ahead and name one of them, Freaks, where it's not really a horror film.
Yeah.
Because what happens in it isn't like horror-esque. It's not spooky. There's no murders. There's no like, well, attempted murder. But
well, yeah.
But there's no.
I mean, I'd be horrified if I got turned into a chicken.
Me fucking too.
Yeah.
But this was labeled as a horror film just because it was about circus people.
Yeah.
And then banned in multiple countries.
Yeah, which is crazy. I did not know that part.
Yeah, dude. But so a lot of these films, I mean, you do have films like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And then outside of the collection that Criterion put on their streaming service, you had like the original Dracula, Frankenstein, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of these films were not like that. It was more plausible things than that. So the collection, I believe, is 13 films total on the Criterion channel. Obviously, there's substantially more than those, but those are just the ones we kind of, focused in on because it was nicely curated for us already.
Shout out Criterion.
Shout out Criterion.
Sponsor us if you want. That's fine.
Now, a lot of these, do you want to like list off the films that were featured on there, or just kind of?
Yeah, sure. Them? I think we should. So I watched 6 of the 13 that were on Criterion, and that would be Murders in the Rue Morgue, Freaks. So we both watched that one. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Mystery of the Wax Museum, The Most Dangerous Game, and 13 Women.
Right. So I also watched 13 Women. I also watched Freaks. I watched Black Cat. I also watched The Most Dangerous Game. And I watched Island of Lost Souls.
Yep. And first of all, can we just get a quick shout out to Faye Ray, the Scream Queen?
Dude, kills it. And like, I swear to God, she's in almost all
She's
of these,
in like
bro.
half the freaking collection, dude. Yeah, so iconic woman from the original King Kong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. And then just absolutely got typecast because, gosh, if she just doesn't have the most iconic scream in like all of cinema history, it is just like I am fascinated by your ability to put out such a guttural scream like that, but it sounds so like tempered or curated. Like, way to go, Faye. That's what I got to say about that. I just said I couldn't. I was so excited to talk about her, so I had to get it off my chest real quick.
But I'm glad you brought up the part about typecasting, because a lot of people in these films were typecasted for their entire careers. A lot of the directors, even though they branched out to make other films, war films, you know, musicals, God knows what else, were stuck in only prominently being able to make these types of films. Also, other actors, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. That's okay. But the guy who originally played Dracula, which once again was not in this list, he's also one of the protagonists in The Black Cat, which was, from this list, my absolute favorite.
The Black Cat?
Bro, the set design, the architecture, bro, it's just... But I'll say I think Freaks is the best film there, but The Black Cat was my favorite.
Okay.
But he also... Eastern European dude, you know. Yeah. Dracula, one of the most iconic roles you can have. Sure. And he could never break that mold where everyone just saw him as, "Ooh, I come to suck your blood."
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair. So let's talk a little bit about some of the interesting kind of themes that we saw across these movies, and then maybe start highlighting some of the specific movies or like moments in movies that we want to talk about. And by themes, I don't necessarily mean, you know, motifs or anything like that. Just generally, like, I thought it was interesting to see the introduction of color in some of these movies, where all they had was, I believe, red and green. Those are like the only two colors in Murders of the Rue Morgue, as well as it was also a Mystery of the Wax Museum.
Yeah, because none of the ones I watched had color.
Oh, interesting.
They were all black and white.
So for those ones, they introduced red and green, and I don't know enough about the technology at the time to know why those were the two colors, but it was interesting to see their I mean, anything that would have been blacked out if you just had a red pass or a green pass over an image was still gray, but you saw the introduction of color, and it was interesting in particular with Murders in the Rue Morgue to see what they did with that. So naturally, costuming lend very heavily into anything like brown, orange, red, or just, you know, bright kind of emerald green. And I thought that was beautiful. Like, it's just it's always fun when you have like a new technology and you can tell that everybody and every part of the process was kind of like culminating to try and emphasize that and like show off, hey, we have this new thing. Like, it's pretty neat, you know. It's not just a black and white picture show. So I thought that was really cool. But also Murders in the Rue Morgue, like you mentioned with I think it was Black Cat, like architecture was beautiful too, and the way it was lit tried to emphasize, they tried to use colors to emphasize the sets as well. And it was, I don't know, it was just really fun to see. You know, it's kind of like all of this is a peek into history, but it was cool to see what they did with it back in the day.
Dude, yeah, absolutely. And like, on the subject of like set design and architecture and all of that, like, I found that was very much a character in itself in a lot of these films. Even in The Most Dangerous Game, the house that he was in, the door knocker with like the bow or the arrow in them and everything like that, just the architecture of that home. But I feel like The Black Cat is the one that like really took it above and beyond.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about The Black Cat, because I did not see that one.
Yeah, so an American writer and his, I don't know if it was his girlfriend, fiance, or wife, but his partner, they're traveling throughout Europe, and their train stops suddenly, and they get in this taxi with the dude who they were sharing their train cart with, and that taxi just flips over off a cliff. Driver's dead on impact. Jeez. They go to the house of this stranger's acquaintance, who apparently he fought in the war with I wish I could remember the character names.
That's okay.
I'm gonna call him Spooky Guy 1, Spooky Guy 2. Spooky Guy 2 is the actual bad guy. Spooky Guy 1 is not the actual bad guy.
All right,
Got
fair
it?
enough. Spoilers.
So Spooky Guy 1 and 2, they fought in the war together. Spooky Guy 1 takes this couple to Spooky Guy 2's house, Art Deco house, beautiful. Also, before I lose this thought, I want to point out every antagonist in these movies is always foreign.
Yep, they're all vaguely European,
dude. Yes.
And every protagonist is a good old fashioned American.
American, you know.
Yep.
And not just an American, but you know, a proper, you know, white, clean cut,
good job,
you know, high society,
yep,
goody two shoe rich boy.
Mm-hmm.
They were not subtle with that at all.
Not even remotely.
Even specifically in 13 Women, when at the end, which I wish they did more with this.
Yeah.
They just kind of dropped this in at the end where like they're like the antagonist is doing all this because she felt, you know, bullied because she wasn't white.
Yeah.
And they barely really talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually something that I kind of noticed as a similarity between 13 Women and Freaks,
mm-hmm.
where there was like this justification for whatever's happening. And it's weird to look at it through today's lens because who it seems like is supposed to be the antagonist in those films kind of like has their story. So like with Freaks, it's gonna be the circus folks. It's really just which is really just like people with mental with like Down syndrome, mm-hmm. people with like amputees,
mm-hmm.
And you know, little people, and like those are like the freaks, right? Which like by standards today just seems ridiculous, but it seems like what they're trying to portray in the movie is that they're the bad guys for coming after this woman who was just a white woman trying to abuse them and take advantage of them and poison one of them to steal his money. Yeah, but it seemed like that was supposed to be the scary movie when they're the scary moment when they're coming for her, and I'm like, that's retribution. And I kind of felt mm-hmm. similarly for 13 Women. I'm like, that's retribution. They treated her like shit, and then they get caught up, and she's playing off of their mysticism that is commonly that just like an uneducated white person in America typically kind of sees foreign people as like, you're vaguely like Eastern European, you must have like some sort of like I know this word isn't okay, but I don't know another way to say it, like gypsy background with like mystical powers, and she's just like essentially feeding them that bullshit that they already think about mm-hmm. her.
Yep.
And I just didn't. It was interesting because I felt more sympathy for the antagonist, and to an extent, like that is a part of what made it pre-code. So, do you know about that part of like the Hays Code and like what some of the aspects that made these pre-code not okay by like Hays Code standards?
Vaguely, but if you could elaborate for the viewers and also for me, so I look like I know more than I actually do.
I would love to, Andres. So the Hays Code was kind of so if you think about like the way that movies are rated nowadays, technically there is not really laws saying that movies need to have a rating, but if you're unrated or if you're an NC-17 kind of film, theaters probably won't show it, and if mm-hmm. theaters aren't showing it, you're not getting views for it, you're not getting money off of it. So just generally kind of accepted principle that's how you're going to go about your movie, mm-hmm. and that you're going to follow essentially the guidelines of that rating system. So like if you want your movie to be PG-13, you're going to keep to the what's within PG-13. The Hays Code is kind of a precursor to that, in the sense that there was not a formal rating system the way that we have now, but there was kind of an accepted guideline for how movies should be made. And your movie probably wasn't going to get shown at theaters or, you know, even really any press or anybody talking about it if you didn't follow the Hays Code. What was actually in it was questionable. It had very severe Catholic undertones, although it was technically kept a secret that it was supposed to be Catholic. Things that were not supposed to be shown were anything that basically the moral of it was, at the end of a movie, people should understand that good is right and evil is wrong. However, by early 1930s American standards, what was considered evil was anything from any sort of lewd sexual acts outside of a marriage that should be condoned. Nobody should be happy about what happened there. Like if anybody cheats outside of a marriage or does any sort of sexual act without being married, that person should be receive some sort of punishment. Any sort of law enforcement or members of the clergy should be respected, and they should be seen as like an authority figure. And if they're ever portrayed not in that case, it should be made very clear to the audience that that is an exception to the rule. Other things that were included were, any sort of sexual depravity, which in this case included interracial couples and homosexuality. So like basically what you would think of as like the most Catholic kind of 1930s, like, this is like the time of prohibition and stuff like that. So whatever you think about in terms of that era, like that's pretty much what the Hays Code is. So being pre-code meant that there was a little bit of liberty that was taken. So like something like the scantily clad leg of the woman in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And the idea of, I don't know, just like some of the gore and stuff like that of this time. Another thing with the Hays Code was the villain had to get essentially what was coming to them. There couldn't be any sort of like there was no allowance for complexity in a villain. So in situations like we were talking about with like 13 Women and Freaks, it could be seen, like for Freaks example, in my opinion, the villain is the American white woman,
absolutely
100%, like without a doubt. That's not allowed via the Hays Code.
You gotta do the old flipperoo on that.
Yeah, exactly. And so so thus endorsing and really reinforcing the ethnic, vaguely foreign individual was always going to be the villain, led to everything going on with the Bond villains always being some foreign individual, and this good old boy is like the protagonist. So that's what's going on with the Hays Code.
What a bunch of hubbubaloo. What a bunch of hoopla.
I do think it's hullabaloo, but it does make for an interesting kind of case study of those 5 years where we had sound and we had a little bit of the Wild West. Now, with that being said, let's not act like all things pre-code horror were. We got a little bit of beef with certain aspects of this.
We do.
Tell me your thoughts, because I know that you mentioned before that you had some things you wanted to say.
Yeah, one of my big problems with these films, which isn't exclusively like their fault, just kind of a product of the time where like films just weren't as long.
Yeah. It was like an hour, most of these.
Yeah, exactly. I felt like so many of these films were sick but so undercooked.
Yeah.
Like 13 Women.
Yeah.
I loved the first act. I was like, oh, this is gonna be gnarly.
Then really rushed through the rest of those 13 women.
Exactly, bro. Same thing with Black Cat, which I never finished saying what it was about. But anyways, they go to creepy house. Dude who owns the house ends up to be he's a Satanist. He worships Satan.
Oh, typical.
But they barely talk about that. That gets only a few minutes of actual like film time, when that's one of the coolest parts of the whole movie, and I wanted more of that, Yeah. So if the film didn't have to be 60 minutes long, if it could have been 2 hours, they could have dived on into that, and I would have been enthralled.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So they could have gone, clearly they could have gone at least that long. I mean, there's limitations to what you could do with the technology at the time, and I'm sure film costs just kind of get exorbitant at a certain point, but if it's a story worth telling, like tell it,
But also Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was like already a well-known story.
Yep.
So that had that going for it. I don't think they were going to do anything like that. And a lot of these films were based off like Edgar Allan Poe works and things like that. But a lot of these films were just little one-offs, you know, and studios being as evil as they were, well, they're evil now, but they were really evil back then too. They weren't going to shell out money for those types of things.
Yeah.
So that was my biggest beef with it. Well, tell me some of your beef.
Well, okay, so my it's tough to say because my beef was not necessarily specific to pre-code horror. It's just like, so it was also interesting because this was like the beginning of a lot of different tropes. And so maybe I was carrying a little bit of that with me into this. So for example, one cool trope was in Most Dangerous Game. It was cool to see the beginning of the trope, at least the first screen portrayal, because it was a book before this, of like the hunter becoming the hunted. Or, you know, like someone, you know, this man wants to hunt man because that's the most dangerous prey in the world. And like, I want to prove I'm the best hunter. Like that's a pretty famous trope in my opinion. And it was cool to see the beginnings of that. At the same time with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, there's another trope that is not like a formal trope, but it pops up a lot where he gets like these powers as Mr. Hyde, and like the first thing that he chooses to do with them is you know, assault a woman. And the same thing happens in another movie roughly around this era, not pre-code, but that we didn't talk about, with The Invisible Man. And I'm just like, I don't know, there was a lot of women being props.
Yeah, dude.
There, you know, I can't say that was 100% of the time, but it sure was a majority where women are just props to either be pretty or to be made the victim.
Yeah, they, even in a film like 13 Women, where like they were the focus of the film, they were still props.
100%. I will say Mystery of the Wax Museum probably did a better job because they had a female reporter and she was like telling the story, but at the same time, while she was being the exception to the rule, the rest of the movie is about literally women being props in a wax museum. Yeah, like little heavy-handed metaphor.
And like a lot of times, like these women were the prize, you know. Pretty much every single one that I watched, that's how it was. Excuse me. But that's like the antagonist wanted the girl, or you know, they were saving a damsel in distress or anything like that. And these female characters were not allowed to be fully fleshed out. They were just, look at this pretty girl over here. And they all had the exact same look. The exact same hairdo. The exact same, you know, like physical build. The exact same facial structure, it seemed like.
Which is why I wanted to, when we first started talking about this, highlight Faye Ray, because she, while she is a scream queen and the scream is what she's known for, she, you know, and fucking good for her. She got typecast too, and like she was such an iconic and important part of so many of these movies, and but was never able to really do more than what she was known for. And I think that's such a shame, because I saw a bunch of tiny moments where I saw a lot of potential, where I knew that like she had more to give and she was told that she couldn't. I also want to note that the only black person we saw, and at least I saw in any of my movies, was the armless, legless man in Freaks.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So
like, I knew it was scarce, but like, that is a very good point. And not only,
the only time you were allowed to be a black man in the film was when you were one of the freaks.
And like one of the most like he didn't have any limbs. One of the most, in their eyes, grotesque of them.
When in fact, I thought he was fucking awesome, because he had a mustache and he lit a cigarette with just his mouth.
That was
or a joint
sick.
Or whatever. It was fucking awesome.
And dude, he had the most tenacity when he was coming at the antagonist. You know, like
the knife in his mouth.
That was hard as fuck, bro.
I thought that was super
sick.
Hard.
But yeah, bro, because minorities did not fit their cookie cutter look that they wanted. And to go back to 13 Women again, just because it's the most recent one I watched,
Sure.
but the antagonist was two separate like ethnicities, you know, combined into one. And that was their whole villain arc.
Yeah.
Because they were a different ethnicity, and that caused them to become an antagonist.
Yeah. It's I guess the point is that it's really cool to take a peek back in history. Mm-hmm. It's really cool to see what they did with what they had, mm-hmm. and it's really interesting to see the beginnings of so much of what we see nowadays in cinema. But it will always be disappointing to take that look back and see the marks of the society that existed at the time. Like there is no separating the like art from the time.
Yeah.
And I wish it wasn't that way. But it kind of fucking is. So there's not a whole lot you can do about it, you know?
Yeah, bro.
That being said, there are just a couple of other things that I wanna highlight about these movies that I thought was really fun, mm-hmm. and really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved the makeup. I thought that was so cool.
Bro. Specifically, you didn't watch Island of Lost Souls, right?
No, I didn't watch that one.
Bro, there were so many close-ups in that film that which they just weren't doing a lot of those.
And it was,
you know?
Yeah.
And it just really the whole point of Island of Lost Souls was going back to tropes, one of the original man playing God, you know, mm-hmm. combining beast with man, you know?
Yeah.
And the makeup department went in, bro. And they really highlighted it with some great shots.
Yeah.
So they weren't in other genres or in other time periods, you know, in the early 1900s, they couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So
no, it was really cool. And like watching Murders in the Rue Morgue, like this they do a little bit of that too. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I thought the transitions, especially towards the beginning of the movie, I was really impressed with the transition from the normal man's face to like the Hyde face. Mm-hmm. And the hair growing on the hand. I was really impressed with the way that was done for the time. I mean, later in the movie, it felt like I got a little bit lazier, but towards the beginning of the movie, when they do the first big reveal and it's like a big thing, it looks very natural. It doesn't look like they just have like this still frame and then they like slow kind of morph or fade it into like this next frame or whatever. Like I was impressed with the movie making that was done there. I was impressed with the makeup that was done there. And mm-hmm. With Murders at the Wax Museum, while I didn't love, again, another kind of trope of the disfigured man as the villain, I can't deny that the makeup artist fucking went off. They popped off on that dude. Like he was a burn victim. Yeah, and dude. His face was like melted and like grotesque. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think that burn victims need to be portrayed as like villains or like they're disfigured or something like that. But as standalone from like a makeup artist perspective, like they did that really well. And I was impressed because I didn't think they had that. And I also think it's cool because when you think about it, outside of these horror films, makeup artists were just there to make people look prettier. Yeah. Everybody was just supposed to look prettier. And like this is their only time to really kind of have fun with it.
Exactly. And then they didn't get to do that again for decades.
Yeah. Shame.
Which, I mean, yeah, there were still horror films going forward after the code came in. But like not to this extent for several decades. You didn't get real gross stuff until God knows how much later.
Yeah.
So, golden time for makeup artists and for effects.
Absolutely. So, you know, I wish I could have seen the way that these types of movies would have developed along with the morals of society, had the Hays Code not kind of Hays Code prohibition, pretty much everything about that just kind of come in and stomped on everything and kind of stagnated a lot of this progress and creativity for several decades.
Bro, yeah, the horror genre in general just would probably be in such a different place right now because the revolutions we're having right now or in the last few years would have happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
You know, waters would have been tested more and we'd be getting a lot more experimental stuff, but
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie.
La vie.
All right. Anything else you specifically want to touch up on, or do you want to just get to our recommendations? Or
yeah, let's go ahead and talk about our recommendations. So going from the first half of the movies that we watched, I feel like I already know what you're gonna say, so I'm gonna let you say it, and then I'll give my recommendation.
My recommendation 100% is The Exorcist.
Yeah,
but I feel like I had a hunch that was gonna be your recommendation too. So my backup recommendation is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because like I said, those are fair. 2 essential viewings that I think everyone should see.
That's super fair. And yes, my recommendation would be The Exorcist. So if you haven't seen that and you were like me a month ago, stop being such a loser.
Yeah,
Get
bro,
to it.
what the nerd.
But because that's the obvious pick, my backup choice actually, mine would be The Conjuring. I know that it didn't necessarily stick with you as much, but I thought it was super, super well done. And I also just love those actors. So I may be a touch biased. That's okay.
That's fair, bro.
Pre-code era. Where are you going with there?
I think Freaks is the most important film to watch out of these, but I just think the Black Cat is sick. But Freaks is my actual recommendation. But to have a backup again, the Black Cat.
Super fair. I'm pretty similar in terms of Freaks being there, and it would be tough for me to even describe why, but I just think it's an important film to watch.
Dude, it was way more progressive than anything else coming out at the time, you know. And just great filmmaking techniques too, bro.
Definitely. And again, we already mentioned it, so it's not a spoiler, but the reveal of the chicken lady at the end is
wild.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
My kind of like more original one probably would be 13 Women, just because I found it really compelling. I wish I had gotten more out of it, but I think that if you went to go watch it, you wouldn't be mad that you did.
Yeah.
So
fair. With
that being said, this is Alex
and Andres
and Kitten Mr. Tamagotchi. By the way, we put this here because I meant to introduce it earlier. This is the cat. It's supposed to be a spooky black cat. It is not, but
it's trying its best.
It's doing its best. It's doing its best. Happy Halloween, ghouls and ghosts. Until next time.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.